Good afternoon from Washington, DC. Great to be with you. Arthur Sinodinos here, Ambassador in Washington. I'm really looking forward to this afternoon. I'm a great believer in defence innovation and the way that that can drive innovation through the economy more broadly. One of the things I'm passionate about is about how Australia adopts an innovation mindset across the whole economy. I believe we punch above our weight when it comes to science and research. We do great things with partners all around the world, but it is important for us to build on that by being able to commercialize research, being able to collaborate with the private sector, academic institutions, public research institutions in that work. And today is all about a really exciting area, quantum, which is developing a number of applications, quantum computing, quantum sensors. We'll go through the list today. We've got a stellar panel. From my point of view, I want to thank G'day and AAA for the hard work they've put into today. We've got the New South Wales government helping to sponsor, and I've been told that following this webinar, the State of New South Wales will host a breakout session to discuss innovative developments in its defence sector and specific opportunities and areas of collaboration for US companies. And that's one thing that I worked on when I was doing my consultations before I became ambassador, which was how do each of the state and territories work on the relationship between Australia and the US in these areas of innovation. And my thanks to Austrade, and my colleague Nichols will round off this webinar at the end. So we're in for a great ride. There's lots of great things to happen. I particularly am keen to see what happens with quantum computing. I was Minister for Industry when we pushed along the federal investment, along with the state government and others, Telstra and the Commonwealth Bank, in the work of Michelle Simmons at the University of New South Wales. And I'm keen to see us develop in Australia the capabilities around all this, so we have the opportunity to maximise on the industry development prospects. That's very important. Be on the ground floor of these innovations and use them to then drive industry development. The other thing that's happened in Sydney, which is so exciting, is that the universities there are collaborating on an academy to train people in relevant skills. Great things going on. The panel are terrific. I will now get Michael Brown, Director of the Defence Innovation Unit, who's our Master of Ceremonies today, to kick it off. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Sinodinos. Pleasure to be here with you all today. I feel privileged to be moderating this panel of very distinguished Australians. The group that I lead, the Defense Innovation Unit at the US Department of Defense, is focused on how do we get commercial technology more widely adopted by the Defense Department. And one of the pillars of the defense strategy in the United States that you may know is that we want to strengthen the partnership that we have with our allies and partners around the world. There's no greater ally or partner to the United States than Australia in the area of defense. So it's a great topic for us to be collaborating on. In particular, we're already focused on how do we bring quantum sensor technology into the Defense Department. It's going to be very important for navigation. So I'm hoping we're going to hear a little bit more about that today, and some of the applications of quantum science that might be a little bit further out, but are going to be critical for defense. So without any more introductory remarks, let me move on to introducing each of our panelists, who will have an opportunity to give you some introductory remarks, and then we'll spend some time in a group conversation. And let's start with Professor Tanya Monro. She's been the Chief Defense Scientist since 2019, and she was previously the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation. Professor Monro was the inaugural director of the Institute for Photonics and Advanced Sensing, and from 2008 to 2014. She's also been the inaugural director for the ARC Center of Excellence for Nanoscale Biophotonics at the University of Adelaide. Her research is in the field of photonics with a focus on sensing, lasers, and new classes of optical fibers. So Professor Monro, if you could provide a short introduction and some context for really setting the stage for today's conversation. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. This is a wonderful initiative, and I'd like to acknowledge that my predecessor, Alex Zielinski, opened the inaugural event in 2018, and it's my pleasure to be here today. Slide, please. Our global environment is changing rapidly. It's highly dynamic, and the Defence Strategic Update launched by Prime Minister Morrison in July set out the challenges in Australia's strategic environment and highlighted the implications of the rapid pace of technological change. Emerging and disruptive technologies are being swiftly translated into military systems, which reduces decision times, improves precisions, and enhances the ability of the military to effectively conduct operations in highly complex and increasingly contested environments. As set out in the Force Structure Plan, defence innovation is a priority for Australia, and Australia has committed around $3 billion of capability investment across defence innovation, science and technology over the next decade. This has particular emphasis on emerging and disruptive technologies. The More Together Defence Science and Technology strategy was launched by Minister Reynolds earlier this year and will shortly be releasing early next year the Defence Capability Innovation Strategy called Concepts to Capability. These complementary strategies aim to change the way Australia invests in research and innovation in defence, emphasising genuine partnerships and increasing the alignment of Australia's broader R&D with defence's biggest challenges and reducing the barriers that have traditionally stifled innovation. Put it simply, we want those with the best ideas to have every chance of pulling them through to capability. And it's my pleasure to share with you as an example under the Concepts to Capability strategy that we intend to establish a new rapid prototyping initiative in early 2021. This will focus on getting early partnerships and putting prototypes into the hands of the ADF fast to expedite the transition of early stage research into capability. Quantum is one of the 11 technology themes prioritised by the Australian Department of Defence, and our interest in quantum tech to date has been predominantly focused on its potential to give us a capability advantage in secure comms, assured PNT, position navigation and timing, and advanced sensing that is resilient to jamming, interference and spoofing. And we've already invested more than $14 million on quantum technologies from the Next Generation Technology Fund and the Defence Innovation Hub. Slide, please. So briefly to talk to the Australian landscape. Australia has a really rich heritage in quantum research and has been a leader in this space for more than 2 decades. There are now 22 quantum-related research institutions in Australia, including 8 universities doing quantum physics research that's well above world standard. And excitingly, there's a growing number of quantum technology startups and small to medium enterprises doing research and commercializing that work. And increasingly, multinationals such as IBM, Microsoft and Rigetti are establishing a local presence to be able to access this IP and these skills from Australian research. So no question is that Australia is a global leader in quantum tech research, but at this moment in time, that potential and promise is not yet matched with the capacity for investment. With the venture capital, entrepreneurship and commercialization culture, we need to truly exploit this opportunity. In April this year, CSIRO, which is Australia's civilian government R&D organisation, led the development of a quantum industry roadmap for Australia. And this roadmap projects conservatively that by 2040, Australia's quantum tech industry could generate over $4 billion in revenue and create 16,000 high-value jobs. But this won't just happen. We need greater industry leadership, investment, coordination and support. Now, defence is a key contributor and beneficiary, but there's more we can do together. It was wonderful to see the launch earlier this week mentioned by the Ambassador of the Sydney Quantum Academy, bringing together the 4 Sydney-based unis with substantial R&D in this space. And Australia's also establishing AusQuantech, which is the Australian Quantum Technology Forum with an industry focus to help support policy and connect stakeholders. Slide, please. Just to wrap up, I wanted to echo the thoughts that Michael said in my introduction. The US is Australia's most important defence ally, and we have deep and enduring science and technology partnership in the area of defence. There are many opportunities for us to co-invest in quantum technologies to leverage our distinctive strengths. Our challenge as trusted partners is to overcome some of the regulatory barriers while maintaining the necessary protections for sensitive technologies. But I'm really encouraged seeing both the strength of our bilateral relationship, but also the way that during COVID, the Australian government has increasingly worked smoothly at a whole of government level, that we can overcome some of these barriers. But of course, doing that requires the right relationships and the right understanding, and today is a wonderful example of doing that. So thank you for the chance to talk to you, and I look forward to some of the panel discussion today.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Great overview to what's happening across Australia, and there's a great amount as you covered. Let's move next to our next panelist, Christine Zeitz. Christine recently joined Northrop Grumman as the General Manager of Asia Pacific, and prior to that, she was the CEO for Australia at Leidos, responsible for strategic growth in Australia and the Asia Pacific region. Prior to that, Christine spent 25 years at BAE Systems in a variety of roles that culminated in a position as President of Northeast Asia. Christine, over to you.
Well, thank you, and hello, good morning, good afternoon. It's great to speak alongside such a distinguished panel today. And when I reflect on my 30 years just hearing Michael talk through my career, I started at BAE Systems, which was British Aerospace when I started. And I think about the programs I worked on. The two programs I worked on was the Parakeet Communication System, which was a battlefield communications that included secure voice and data trunking, which for its time was considered advanced military communications. And the other one was a Nautilus command and control system fitted to the Royal Australian Navy mine hunter fleet, which despite continuous upgrades just pales into significance of the processing speed and accuracy leveraged from quantum-based technologies today. So I've certainly seen the generational change in technology in 30 years. And of course, as Tanya described, we're seeing the most incredible shift in global strategic requirements for our defence and security, which means that speed and agility are fundamental to achieving a competitive advantage in the complex threat environments. So Northrop Grumman in Australia is undergoing an exciting growth phase. We have a very strong sustainment and modernisation business for the Royal Australian Air Force, but our growth is in the high-end technologies. We're positioning for programs such as the Integrated Air and Missile Defence Capability, future military satellite communications, and of course where Australia will receive the highly anticipated Triton high altitude, long endurance, unmanned ISR aircraft. Now for those programs, of course, the key is rapidly and securely processing information. It's critical to the success of those programs and also to give Australia the edge in competition. So the nature, volume, security and speed of this information processing is critically important. And as we look to the future, particularly with new threats such as hypersonic weapons, the rapid assessment of threats, decision-making and engagement of those threats is key to Australia's and allies' operational success. So for Northrop Grumman Australia, this is where quantum presents a huge scope of opportunity, particularly when viewed through the prism of fifth generation platforms and systems being procured by the Australian government, all of which necessitate timely and predictive decision-making and rapid and secure information flow between capability elements to be a truly integrated force. So this paradigm shift in technology stands to benefit many elements of the future capability spectrum. Quantum technologies enable exciting new concepts in the field of sensing, secure comms, and advanced computing. And we see applications for artificial intelligence, machine learning, prediction in complex environments, and other similar problems where probabilistic approaches provide advantages over deterministic methods. So where Northrop Grumman Australia really seeks to value add in this space is leveraging the technology campaigns of our wider corporation in the US. So as Tanya says, you know, the US-Australia partnership really is within Northrop Grumman, and then capitalising on government-to-government levers such as the National Technology and Industrial Base and Allied Prototyping Initiative to facilitate US-Australia industry-to-industry defence technology innovation outcomes. With respect to collaboration, our US colleagues are currently undertaking a partnership with the Australian National University in Canberra on precision navigation and timing. This work is facilitating enhanced connections between Northrop Grumman, ANU, the DST group and other Five Eyes Nation contributors in the development of quantum navigation technology. The desired end state here is that we begin growing an in-country quantum research and development team to work with ANU and pursue defence application transition opportunities in quantum sensing from first transition through to production. And it would be a great news story for Australian research and development if we could achieve a sovereign capability that uses quantum technology to allow strategic defence assets to navigate in GPS-denied environments. So conscious of time, I'll pass back to Michael. And once again, I thank you for the opportunity to join the discussion today and look forward to the rest of the dialogue.
Christine, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Professor Michael Biercuk. He's the CEO and founder of QControl. That's an award, and he is an award-winning experimental quantum physicist, serving as a professor of quantum physics and quantum technology at the University of Sydney. He's also one of the world's leading experts in quantum technology. QControl is funded by some of the world's leading venture capital firms, including some where I'm located here in Silicon Valley. Most recently, QControl opened its US headquarters in Los Angeles, so I'm hoping to see more of you here on the West Coast of the United States. Michael, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here today. It's nice to speak on this panel as a technologist and as an entrepreneur, and also, as you may be able to hear from my accent, as an American who's been living for the last 11 years in Australia. I moved to Australia in 2010 in order to start my academic career as a professor at the University of Sydney. And then in 2017, based in part on the research that we had done, focusing on something called quantum control, I founded the company QControl, which we just heard about, backed by international venture capital organizations. It's actually Australia's first VC-backed quantum technology company. What we do is make quantum technology work. We've heard a lot about the various applications of quantum technology, from computing to sensing and advanced navigation. Unfortunately, quantum technology is extremely difficult to build and realize. It is extremely fragile. And our focus is on using control engineering in the quantum domain to make quantum technologies useful. And we deploy our expertise in this as infrastructure software across all of the various domains. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. This is an important distinction that I'd like to make at this point. QControl is often in the media. We were in the media this morning as a quantum computing company. We are not a quantum computing company. We are a quantum technology company. And I emphasize this point because the potential impact of quantum technology across different verticals is so large. Even though we do hear so much about quantum computing in the media because of the cultural zeitgeist and the investor frenzy that's going on right now, that was really only our starting point. In that space, QControl is focused on making infrastructure software that improves the overall performance of the underlying quantum hardware. This is something we've demonstrated with our partners at, say, IBM and Rigetti Computing, where we've driven 10x improvements in the performance of the underlying hardware. But since our Series A in the middle of 2019, we began in earnest an expansion of our opportunities and our engagements in quantum sensing and including advanced navigation. So this overlaps a little bit with what we heard from Christine and Tanya already. We focus on improving the performance of quantum sensors, and in fact, we have prototyping activities as well that are in collaboration with a local partner in Australia called Advanced Navigation. We expand from there to include new opportunities in magnetometry and gravimetry for underground hardened target detection, for search for aquifers, for water applications in mining and the like. This is a very rich area of activity and one in which we are growing rapidly. And it's our expertise across these various verticals which has led us to become a trusted partner for most of the active companies in the quantum technology development space. So as I mentioned, from the beginning of 2018, we were a founding member of the IBM Q Startup Network. We are a commercial supplier to Rigetti, to Fermilab, to NIST, to Accenture, to Chalmers University, a range of universities, a range of public sector organizations. And in a model that I think is going to be increasingly typical in Australia, we were global from day one. There was, at the time we launched in late 2017, zero commercial market in Australia, and we went immediately offshore for our market. Now, fortunately, that's changing. There's growth in interest and activity among the public sector and private sector clients, as we heard in the earlier talks. But this idea of being global from the outset is, I think, an essential topic for the Australian community in this space. And that global outlook is also, of course, what has led us to be featured multiple times in, say, The Economist and Forbes and Wired and TechCrunch, making us a top 10 global quantum technology company already. Now, really, a lot of our strength comes from leveraging the investments that have been made specifically across the US-Australian border in quantum technology, science, and research. For many years, the United States government has, alongside the Australian government, been a major funder of scientific activity in universities. In Australia, it's funded my academic team for quite a long time, from organizations like the Army Research Office and the National Security Agency, IARPA. This background in research funding has led to the development of a community of researchers who ultimately become the core of our activities. We now have assembled across our offices in Australia, in Los Angeles, as we heard from Michael's introduction, and now in Berlin, the world's largest collection of expert, that is PhD level quantum control engineers. There is no team that can match our capabilities in this. And we've now crossed over 2.5 billion executions on IBM's quantum computers, which puts us among the most prolific users of that hardware. But we do focus very much on product. We are not a public sector R&D organization that's dressed up as a company. We are a company. We build products and we market those products. So we focused very strongly on ensuring that we match our expertise and depth of experience in quantum control engineering with equal experience in product development and product engineering, which of course is another great opportunity to leverage a lot of the existing strength and talent in Australia and of course in our offices abroad. I wanted to close with the fundamental message of who we are and what we're doing in this field. If you look back at the advent of most modern technology, it has been control engineering that has made it work. The Wright brothers, the first to fly, achieved what they did because they embraced today what would be called control theoretic topics, the idea of deformable airfoils, the idea of, as captured in the quote here, giving the pilot absolute command over the motion of the machine in every axis all the time. You can play the tape forward today to walking robots and drone technology and autonomous vehicles, and in every single instance, it has been control engineering that has made those technologies work. And QControl is excited to be performing the same exact role through our software development, our engineering, and our hardware development efforts in the quantum technology space. So with that, let me thank you. And if anybody's interested in getting in touch, please feel free to do so. Thanks so much.
Michael, thanks. And thanks for that historical analogy as well. Let's turn to our fourth panelist, Dr. David Byrd. And he is the DSTG Starshot leader. And David, I hope you're going to tell us what that means for those of us who aren't familiar like myself. David received his PhD in high energy astrophysics from the University of Adelaide, and following postdoctoral appointments at the University of Illinois, and University of Utah, Iowa State University, and University of Adelaide, David joined the defense team in 1998 as a senior research scientist. In 2018, he was appointed as the inaugural leader of the Quantum Technologies Group within the Cyber and Electronic Warfare Division and tasked with establishing and growing this group with a focus on quantum sensing, communications, and timing. David.
Thank you for that introduction, Michael. And if I could have my first title slide, please. So our driver is a focus on capability. What new capabilities or improvements to existing capabilities can be provided by quantum technologies? And we're trying to achieve that with a mix of short to mid-term and long-term investments. So I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of our defence investment in quantum technologies. Next slide, please. In early 2019, our Defence Quantum Research Network was established through a call under our Next Generation Technologies Fund Quantum Technologies theme to Australian academia and industry. Out of 80 proposals we received, we were able to fund 11 for up to 3 years for a total cost of 6.6 million. 43 academics, 4 industry personnel are listed as primary investigators across 9 Australian universities, 2 companies and NASA. And there's a strong focus on quantum sensing, quantum communications and timing, and by that I mean atomic clocks. We also have an interest in quantum computing, but once again it's related to capability. We're not too concerned with what makes up the hardware of a quantum processor, what a qubit is made of, more what can we do with it. So for us, there is a strong focus on algorithm development and applications, and we still got that question out there, what is the killer app for quantum computing? Also under this theme, we provide support to 2 of the Australian Research Council's Centres of Excellence, which are focused on quantum technologies. They are the Engineered Quantum Systems Centre of Excellence and the Centre for Quantum Computation and Communication Technology. And you can understand why we call that CQ-CTRL. In both of those centres, we sponsor annual programs. Finally, under this theme, we are also currently sponsoring 7 PhD students in universities within our Quantum Research Network as a contribution to the future quantum workforce. We are also working in partnership with the UK in this program, have a parallel program to provide common training opportunities in systems engineering, military awareness, entrepreneurship, and culminating in a showcase event. And we've been looking to set up something similar with the US. Beyond the Next Generation Technologies Fund, we also have the Defence Innovation Hub, which focuses generally on mid-TRL proposals, and it is also supporting programs in both quantum communications and quantum sensing. Next slide, please. Under the new Defence Science Technology Strategy, a series of major research initiatives known as star shots are underway. And the overarching theme of these star shots is prevailing in contested environments. The Quantum Assured Position Navigation and Timing Star Shot will address what happens when we lose GPS or GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems more generally. We rely on GPS for precise manoeuvre and navigation on the battlefield, precision-guided weapons, and to coordinate and synchronise distributed forces. The timing aspects of GPS are used in communications, cryptography, intelligence collection, and synchronizing distributed computer systems. And this core reliance on military systems on the global positioning system is a critical vulnerability. So the challenge is to assure uninterrupted operations in complex and contested environments where access to these systems is compromised, degraded, or denied. There are also other environments such as underground, underwater, or in complex urban environments which also suffer from a degradation or total lack of GPS access. Next slide, please. This starshot will address this through developing, miniaturizing, and maturing quantum-based clocks, accelerometers, magnetometers, and gravimeters. These sensors have the potential to offer new levels of precision and sensitivity, contributing to new capabilities. Complementary advances in classical technologies to improve sensitivity, accuracy, and precision, and to drift over long duration. And perhaps the best outcome will be an integration and fusion of both quantum and classical solutions to produce hybrids for timing and navigation. The initial activity of this starshot is to participate in a series of Five Eyes trials in the coming years to test and demonstrate both quantum and non-quantum based technologies as applied to the assured PNT problem. Next slide, please. Finally, in collaboration with the US, we are supporting an OSMURI activity. OSMURI, as you can see there, is Australia-US Multidisciplinary University Research Initiative. Under this scheme, we are jointly investing in a quantum computing project entitled Quantum Control by Spectator Qubits, or better known as noise-cancelling headphones for quantum computers. This is a collaboration that connects 8 US universities with 3 Australian universities, and we're proud to be a part of that. And finally, there is a proposal to establish a bilateral academic research initiative on quantum with a planned workshop in Australia to kick off this program. Unfortunately, this has been delayed due to COVID, but we hope to kick this off next year. The aim is that this will build upon and enhance the relationships that already exist between Australian academia and the US. And you heard Michael earlier talk about some of the support he receives from the US. So that's a very brief overview of Australia's Defence's quantum technology initiatives. And I look forward to the coming discussions.
David, thanks for all the bridges you're building between Australia and the US here. Well, as you can see, we've got a panel that's has some deep technical expertise and represents government, business, and academia. So we've got all the sectors represented. I'd like to start our discussion with kind of the state of quantum and how ready it is to be used. And Michael, I'll turn to you first, but you know, we're all familiar with this hype diagram that we've seen where the hype often exceeds where the technology is and where it can actually be used. So I'd like to turn to you first to give your perspective as you're working with companies to bring quantum to market. Where is it most ready? What's furthest along and what's furthest behind? And then I'll give each of our panelists an opportunity to comment as well.
Oh, thanks for the opening question. That's a very big one to start off our discussion. And accordingly, I think it's a little bit open-ended. So I'll give a couple of insights to this. The first is that anytime there's a really exciting new technological activity, hype will be part of the story, right? And so a key part of what we all have to do is work to cut through that. Now, I've personally written primers for national security professionals in a journal called War on the Rocks that help align people who are new to the field in understanding what is real and what is not. But the fundamental idea is that quantum computers are a real thing. I build them myself, my colleagues around the world build them. They really exist and they really are processing information today. The challenge is that they are still very small and they can't yet solve problems that are relevant. They can't yet solve commercially relevant problems and give an advantage. So we're all looking that in the next, say, 5 to 8 years, we'll cross over a threshold to achieve what is often called quantum advantage, where it is advantageous from a perspective of how long it takes to come to a solution, how expensive it is in compute resources, or some other metric. It is advantageous to use a quantum solution as opposed to the best competing classical alternative, right? Now, that's actually a pretty quick timeline, but all the same, it means that for most organizations, this is a medium to long-term investment in early readiness as opposed to deploying the technology today. Now, our role at QControl is to make all of this happen, to make all of it work. And of course, by virtue of our nature as an infrastructure software provider, we're able to be active in the market today, even before these real useful quantum computers come to market. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there are many other areas of quantum technology that are valuable. We've heard quite a lot so far about advanced navigation that leverages quantum enhanced precision navigation. You know, this is an interesting example because what it really does is it leverages the instability of hardware that I mentioned in my remarks as an asset. It takes that weakness and turns it into the source of a signal that we employ in order to detect very, very small signatures. Now, this is, in the case of navigation, used to measure acceleration, but it can equally be used to measure increments of time, as David mentioned, or to measure gravitational anomalies or magnetic anomalies. And so right now, there is a transition underway in the quantum sensing space from early academic exploration of what the science tells us is possible towards industrial deployment for purposes that are defined by industry pull or defense pull, where, say, our defense partners will indicate certain kinds of signatures that they wish to detect, And there is now an emerging engineering challenge focused on miniaturizing systems, on making them tight swap for those of your audience who are familiar with that acronym, size, weight, and power being reduced, and making them useful deployable technologies. Now, all that is happening right now. And again, in this next few years, we see that those first generations of useful commercial technologies will come online. And of course, we are working very hard at QControl to deliver a generation as well.
That's great. Christine, since you mentioned you're working on a project like this right now, how close do you think we are with the application for precision navigation and timing?
Yeah, look, what Michael says really, I really identify with, because we're bringing in technologies now through the R&D phase. And what we as a prime do is we're looking forward into the demand. So when we look at the defence industry plan, we see, you know, the mission that the customer needs to achieve, and then our job is to bring capabilities together to integrate them to deliver that mission. And so what I see is that sometimes the capability is actually developed while delivering the program to the customer. So, you know, I don't know that it needs to be finished, you know, before you sell, if I put it that way. I've seen through large programs, you know, the requirements that our government have to achieve certain missions demands a certain capability, and we go and find the tenants, the low TRL level of that capability, and then we sign up to a long-term contract, and through that contract we actually are doing R&D through the program. And I think that's a great dynamic that our customer does actually ask us to do, you know, go above and beyond today, I think, because we have the great privilege of working in a long-term business that we don't expect. It's not commercial. You know, we don't sell retail. We're not flowing through the capability in a very short space of time, which suits some people and doesn't suit other people. But in doing that long-term program, what I've seen in past programs is the most incredible technologies are delivered through the program. So I really think the most important question is, what do we need? What do we need? And that drives the requirement. And you know, the navigation time, you asked the question, where do you think it is? You know, we need to crack this, you know, in the short term, being 3 to 5 years. and we need to start having the technology to operate. And you know, there's certainly these technologies around now in a GPS denied environment. So I would just say that you know, the custom, and Tanya's doing it in her star shots, you know, they need to identify the competitive edge we need. They need to ask industry for those solutions, and then we will respond and pick up the technologies from DSTG and SMEs like Michael and bring it forward.
Thanks for that. Tanya, looks like you wanted to get in on this. I saw you nodding.
Oh, look, brilliant conversation. The only thing I'll add is that we're changing the way we work to be able to get prototypes into the hands of the warfighter early, so they don't have to be fully mature. We just need to get a sense of what's possible, and then we can invest and partner. So I think both Michael and Christine have talked to that different future, and that's what we see. So we've got quantum technologies planned to go on exercises in 2022 and 2024, and that's exciting. And I think we'll get the confidence out of that to be able to narrow down on the quantum tech that Australia can distinctively build. And, you know, through the bilat, we work closely to get that enhanced mutual reliance. And so we know more deeply what our partners in the US can also do to, and what we can do to support you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was music to my ears, because that's one of the things we try and do at Defense Innovation Unit. Partner early with an end user so we can be in touch with what the real needs are, and then try and develop something as we go. As you point out, it sometimes is an iterative process with new technologies. David, Tanya directly referred to what you're doing, putting this into practice in some exercises coming up. So your perspective on this question.
I think all the speakers so far have nicely summarised the situation going forward. And yes, my particular program, which Tanya just referred to then, will depend on all of this. I'll just pick up a point that Michael made about size, weight and power swap. And the way I look at this is that we start with something when we're developing prototypes. You don't focus so much on size, weight and power. You focus on actually getting something working. And then you put it into situations where size, weight and power isn't an issue. And even though my naval architect friends will get upset, ships, maritime platforms have the least size, weight and power restrictions. And then once you've got that the technology working, you can then work on miniaturizing it, cutting down size, weight and power. And one example we're doing this with in particular is atomic clocks. And once you do that, you can then take something from a maritime platform, you can put it on a spacecraft, you can give it to a soldier, or you can put it in a fast jet. They all have different environments with more extreme size, weight and power requirements. So that's the process that I see. And we're at that early stage in many of these technologies now, but we are at the point where we can demonstrate some of these technologies in the next couple of years.
So I think the comments from both David and Tanya have highlighted something that's very exciting in Australia right now, and to be fair, it is taking the lead from the US, which is having the government as an early customer of advanced technology. This is something that, Michael, has been enormously successful. I mean, I used to work at DARPA. There was a role for DARPA as a customer in order to drive success in both small industry and, of course, in university research. That is a newer development in Australia. And it's very exciting to see in the star shots, for instance, that the government is stepping up and saying that they want to be a early customer of advanced technology, not mature platforms where you go through $1 billion procurement, but rather advanced technology, sometimes low TRL, in order to help small industry bridge the gap, and of course our friends who are at the large primes, bridge the gap between the university research that we hear so much about and the commercial, or at least targeted defense sensing applications that are in such high demand. So very excited about this new development.
I agree with you. Kind of harkens back to when defense was leading some of the technology development that goes back a few decades. I'm really impressed with how much work is being done on the research side in Australia. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about manufacturing capability and supply base. Probably not too soon to be thinking about developing those capabilities. So I wonder if any of you have thoughts about what we need to be doing today to stimulate that, where that is in Australia today as a ready base to draw on. Who would like to start this one? Christine.
Michael, I might just comment about generally the decision to, manufacture something in Australia, and what I've seen pivot quite substantially with the pandemic in the last 12 months, it's not even been 12 months, is this great focus on sovereign capability. So the government and the Australian Defence Department have been looking at for now probably some time around what should be the priority industry capabilities that we manufacture or own or have access to on Australian soil, sovereign capability. What COVID did was push that a little further in terms of the supply chains that we've had difficulty to access through the height of the pandemic. And so what I would say to this is that there'll be more appetite, I think, to look at investment cases for manufacturing. And Michael said it before, it's what is manufacturing quantum technologies? I mean, that's not the question, but what are the niche aspects of quantum that we think that we should have manufacturing in Australia? I think that's the interesting question.
Maybe if I can follow on
please.
that. I think this brings up an extremely important point for the audience, that when people hear the word quantum, they think esoteric, they think nerdy. And aside from the cultural implications of that being unfortunate, it also gives this false view that this is for driving prosperity in a very, very narrow set of people, that only people with PhDs in quantum physics, which is a vanishingly small portion of the population, is going to benefit from this. And that's not at all true, because at QControl, for instance, my first hire was a general software engineer. My second hire was a designer, someone who was, super expert in Photoshop and the like, Illustrator. This is an opportunity for a rising tide to lift many boats. And specifically when it comes to manufacturing, if we're building, say, the atomic prototypes that go into these quantum enhanced precision navigation systems, we require advanced machining, really high precision computer numerical control. This is the kind of thing that used to reside, for instance, in the auto industry or in the product lines for large scale defense procurement, but now can be leveraged for our sector. Now, the same is true for all sorts of manufacturing capabilities, whether they be in circuit board development, in advanced electronics design. People who do avionics can also contribute to the quantum technology sector. There really is a lot of capability that can be brought to bear, but there also is a need for investment. Now, the unfortunate reality is in my academic team and so far in QControl, we outsource almost all of our machining jobs to China. And this is because it's available and they can deliver within days. Now, we're very much hoping that with continued public sector investment in that kind of advanced manufacturing of machined prototypes in Australia, that we'll see a transition where there's greater infrastructure support. We also are very keen to see greater support for public sector trades education like TAFE across the domains that are relevant to us, from electronics and advanced machining all the way over to coding.
And if I may, Michael, I feel like that's the perfect chance to build on the comments of both Christine and Michael. COVID has accelerated an existing appetite and intent of the Australian government to invest in sovereign industry capability. I think the quantum space is at a tipping point, and I think there are a number of reasons for that, both the sheer scale and excellence of what we have in this nation, the clarity of its potential uses and applications, and the increasing signs that that community is coming together, coordinating and speaking with a single voice that I think will help us get around some of the early teething problems you have in any new industry. I see defence and our bilateral as playing a key forcing function in helping drive some of this acceleration. And I think we have a model in sovereign industry capability plans, or SICPs as they're known, to try and apply this into the quantum industry. So it's a very exciting time.
That's a great point. So, and a perfect segue into a question I wanted to ask you, David, which is, as we start to think about more sovereign capabilities, and I agree with you completely, Tanya, COVID has accelerated the same conversation, obviously, in the US. What do we need to do in defense to be really better at working with some of these smaller companies? We of course are going to need capabilities like what Christine is providing as a prime, but now there may be some new companies we need to be thinking about working with. What do we need to do in the defense sector to be more ready and willing to do business with those types of innovative companies?
Thanks, Michael. The first thing I think we need to do is to increase our agility and our flexibility, so change and shortcut some of our bureaucracy. And Defence has started doing that. There was a couple of things that we've implemented recently. Firstly, for research agreements with our universities in particular, we've just had a new partnership signed with all of 37 of the public universities in Australia, which shortcuts a lot of the bureaucracy and paperwork in getting this research signed. Secondly, we've just put in place the Defence Security Collaboration Framework as well, because as people work with Defence, there are security concerns, and we've now got a formal process to deal with that as well.
Sounds like you're making some progress in that space. We're trying to at the Defense Innovation Unit. I'll just turn to some of the folks we need to work with. So turn first to Christine and then Michael. What improvements would you like to see us make so we can be more agile, as David suggested? Christine, go ahead, you start.
Thank you. Look, I think primes do have a very strong role here, and I've again been around for a while, so I've seen the dynamic change to very, very I think, professionally and to access technology, a good thing to SMEs. What the prime's role is to actually support the SME in the defence requirements, in the contracting requirements, in the training of how to muddle through what is a very bureaucratic procurement process. And when we bid a large program like the space, the satellite communications program, we partner with Australian industry and SMEs to do that. And I like to think that we take away that burden from them and take that burden ourselves of the linkage between the raw technology and the products and capabilities they have, and how you deliver that to defence, which is a very complicated process and documentation to do that. So I wouldn't, and this is why I paused at the beginning of the question. Yes, I acknowledge that direct access is important in some cases, but I would still advocate that a nice route to market to defence is through not only Northrop Grumman, but the Boeings and Lockheeds and BAEs. And we need to make sure, and I sit on the board of the Centre for Defence Industry Capability, which was the board and the entity established when the last first principles review, and we tried to eliminate this bureaucracy. And the CDIC is set up for the purpose of having more Australian industry access this defence procurement, the spending. And so, as I sit on that board, there are a lot of activities underway to make it easier for SMEs to access directly to defence, but also it must be remembered that there's a nice route to access through the primes.
No question, a lot of our work is with primes because they help pull together complementary aspects of what other companies' capabilities are. Michael, just turn to you quickly. What would you add? What would you like to see David and me do to make it easier to work with defense?
Well, I think there are two critical words. One is fast and the other is open. Fast has already been addressed a little bit in terms of bureaucracy, but when you're a small company that has an existence lifetime of 6 to 12 months, you can't wait 24 months for a contract to come through, right? It is just not feasible. Right. And so that part of the community will simply opt out of engaging with defense. And that's a giant loss for the community. In terms of the second one, open, I think this is underappreciated. And I want to preempt my statement by saying I am no shrinking violet from matters of national security. I worked at DARPA. I was a consultant to the U.S. intelligence community. I believe very strongly in both sovereign capability and in security. However, in quantum technology, I think there's been an early preemptive move to just, lock it all up as much as possible, largely driven by kind of misinformation in the media about what quantum technology is, what it can do, and what perhaps adversarial nations are up to these days. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy lists their activities in quantum science as primarily basic research, fundamental research. Now, obviously, when we're talking about building navigational prototypes, we're not talking about basic research. We're talking about applied or strategic research. All the same, I think when you want to engage with between defense, say, and the SME sector, it needs to be realized that our sector does not behave like the primes. We are much more open. We are internationally engaged. I have a team split between the United States and Los Angeles. They must be able to communicate openly at all times. We must be able to share our work. We believe in security, but not blanket bans on our ability to communicate, because that would kill us in the VC world. But also, it's really essential that all of our activities are viewed in the context of being small enterprises. Like when we talk about defense security engagement and security with industry, it needs to be understood that we are not big primes. We do not operate corporate networks. As small enterprises, we are cloud native, right? We start leveraging all of the advanced information technology that makes companies like Google and whoever else so powerful. That's where we start. We don't start with legacy systems. And it's really important that defense understands that. And when we work together towards coming up with security policies, that those major differences in how our companies are structured and what we can and cannot afford are brought forward in the discussion.
Great point. Do you want to add something, Tanya?
Yeah, look, just simply to acknowledge that there's an absolute role for both. And we're increasingly acknowledging that in defence in the way we partner to accelerate the development of technology. We've increased our partnering directly with SMEs, you know, recently ran a new scheme called ICERA, which had over 190 SMEs apply, which is brilliant appetite. There's a place and a time for doing that direct work, and we do it. But of course, primes are going to always play a critical role in delivering the large scale capability. And we're committed to making sure that the settings are right for primes to work with SMEs too, to incorporate their activities in the bigger programs. So both are critical. And acknowledge, Michael, that we've still got a long way to go and a lot of challenges to work through around security, but it is paramount. Really, you know, sovereign industry capability is inextricably tied with security. You know, for Australia to invest in things, we need to know that they can deliver for Australia. Thank you.
I think quantum is the perfect new technology to defense start working in a different way with industry, both primes and the smaller companies, and to really put in practice what you said, Michael. We need to be much faster, and we need to be more open. We tend to overclassify things and not be as open as we can to move the technology along. Well, let me thank you so much for what I thought was a very engaging discussion. I learned a lot about where things are in Australia, which was great. And let me turn it over to Nick Nichols in the Consul General in San Francisco for Australia. Nick.
Thank you, Mike, for your outstanding moderation of today's session, and of course to our panelists, Tanya, Christine, Michael and David. We traversed some pretty diverse territory today, so I hope people who dialed in found something that they could take away. Being the trade and investment guy, I was particularly interested in the discussion about Defence's approach to embracing startups by removing barriers like alternative procurement techniques and improving its own agility to take advantage of commercial technologies. I think quantum is exciting, and Australia took a bet about 25 years ago on it and is reaping the rewards by producing truly world-class capabilities, and we've just heard about some of that today. And while we were talking defence, our skills are broader than that. So thanks to our soon-to-be chief scientist, Kathy Foley created the CSIRO's Quantum Roadmap, which lays out a broad approach for quantum for the next 25 years in Australia. Thank you to the AAA and its sponsors, the Australian Trade and Investment Commission and New South Wales Global for today's event. Thank you and goodbye.